He stands up, he scans the room, and then people focused more on what he said after. But listen to what he told that lady, and I think she handled the situation very well.
You're not waiting your turn.
I will make order.
That already, you can't wait for your turn. What Macron says after she says that, for me, was much, much more telling.
As he's picking the mic?
Exactly. It was much, much more telling because it revealed how the imperialist thinks.
Okay.
He says that I want to make some order.
So this order that you're saying
exactly
is I'm bringing my systems.
Exactly.
So order is, we'll do this thing my way.
Exactly.
Because a host who lets a guest control his household or her household is a weak host. Peace and blessings, everybody. I am your brother Orina, all the way from the motherland, all the way from Kenya, Nairobi, nation's capital. Welcome to Sell Africa to Africans, the home of Pan-Afrikanism. Well, today we have a friend on the show. He's my brother, he's my friend. He has been here twice. And this is a very opportune time to have him on the show. You guys have seen what went on for the past 3 days with France, Kenya, Summit, Africa Forward, whatever they call it. We are going to unpack all of it. Plus, Mali defense minister being killed in a terror attack. We're going to mention that as well. No, not only mention, we're going to explain it and discuss it and unpack it fully. We'll see who's sponsoring the terror attacks. We'll see. We'll unpack everything. So stay tuned. This is going to be a jam-packed episode. So please welcome my friend, my brother, David John, DJ Bwakali. DJ.
Great, bro.
How are you?
I'm doing great.
You know, you're my guy.
Oh, yeah.
I've always told you, you're one of my favorite people.
Thank you so much.
You're doing well.
Merci beaucoup.
Yeah, you look good. You
Great.
look healthy.
Yeah, thank you.
How are you doing? How's life so far?
It's awesome, man. As long as we're breathing, as long as we're African, we're doing great.
Man.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
Yeah.
You have come this is the best time for you to come to the show.
Yeah.
I've been watching your TikToks about France, Kenya. Now, this isn't a coincidence, especially after Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso are decolonizing from France, is when France is finding a new friend in East Africa. What do you think about all this? Let's first of all, before we go to what Macron, the crazy things Macron said. Why is France coming to Kenya right now? Why now and why this way? Yeah.
Great. I'm so happy to be here today. I mean, I love being on my brother Orina's show because he's an example of Africa's greatest resource, which is Africa's youth. Africa is the most youthful continent in terms of having the most youthful demographic. So it is Africa's young people who can truly, truly transform this amazing continent. So I celebrate what Orina is doing on this show. And I completely believe that if we continue in such a mindset, a decolonized mindset, completely decolonized, then Africa has no option but to succeed. Now, my name's DJ Bwakali, as you've heard. And as I always say, Africa is my superpower. I truly believe that it is your superpower too. It is your superpower, Orina.
Yes.
And what I mean by that, it's not just some fancy slogan, but the moment we as African people begin to believe in ourselves, the moment we begin to believe that we're enough, then nobody can stop us. We become unstoppable. And I firmly believe, Orina, that Africa's greatest resource is the people of Africa themselves. You know, it is actually the most powerful force on earth. The people of Africa in the motherland and in the diaspora, which is roughly 2 billion. All of us in the motherland are about 1.4, 1.5 billion. And then when you bring on board our African-American brothers and sisters and, you know, in the diaspora, all the Africans, wherever they may be, we're about 2 billion.
So we're the most populated race in the world.
Exactly. So it is up to us to make the most of that. It is up to us to make it count. And in fact, before I give you the answer to, before I talk a little bit about this so-called Africa Forward Summit, I just want to make something clear. Every single African who is watching, you need to understand that you can either be Africa's greatest curse or Africa's greatest blessing. What I mean by that is this: we now have to be completely solution-oriented. Every problem that we see afflicting Africa, we are the ones who must come up with a solution to that. Do we have bad governance in Africa? Yes, we do. Then let's come up with a solution to that.
Yes.
And in a previous show, you and I talked about Afrocentric forms of governance. The fact that copying and pasting Western-style democracy into Africa hasn't worked for us. And you remember we shared about Africa having elected about 500 presidents from the late 50s.
To now.
Exactly, to now. All these about 500 presidents elected through the ballot box, Western-style democracy. But out of all those presidents, we could only count less than 10 that have been truly transformative. And we then say that anybody who is saying that coup d'etat then is a way to go, I gave you that statistic that there have been about 100 successful coup d'etats in Africa. And out of those, about five
were progressive.
Exactly. The others are just jokers in uniform, So it's so important for us to understand as we talk about all these things. And as we have this conversation today, let us keep just going back to that as a northern star, that, okay, this is the challenge. What's the solution? What can people do? Because if we don't do that, it becomes an echo chamber, where, yes, what we're speaking is truth, but we either preaching to the choir or we're just singing the same hit as we should, But as we do that, we must trigger solutions because this continent needs solutions. Now, to France, Africa, man, where do I even begin?
Why are they here in the first? Why now? What has led them to pick Kenya?
Let me explain something. The imperialists, one of the things imperialist does very well is to have a long-term agenda. Because when the imperialist has a long-term agenda, they reduce us to reacting to that agenda all the time. You see, every minute that you and I spend talking about France, as we're gonna do, but thankfully we have said that we will not just react. As we react, we're also going to respond, to be proactive on what's the way forward. Because the imperialist wants to keep the African preoccupied with reactionary politics and reactionary life. So that answers the question of why now. Why now? Because they have a long-term agenda to ensure that now that Africa appeared to be wobbly, actually it is erroneous to say that West Africa has slipped out of their grip. It hasn't.
It hasn't.
It hasn't at all. You saw Bassirou Diomaye Faye, the president of Senegal here. He, at present, is at loggerheads with
Sonko.
With Sonko, Ousmane Sonko, the Prime Minister of Senegal. Because Ousmane Sonko is the leader of the party, now the ruling party. Ousmane Sonko was the one who was to run for president, but he was barred from doing so. They slapped on him fake charges. But he still outsmarted them by saying that, okay, if you guys are saying I can't run, somebody else will run. And then they came up with a slogan in Senegal at that time of the elections that Sonko Muy Faye, which simply means that Sonko is fire. They were trying to show the Senegalese populace that, guys, I may not be running,
but I have a guy.
I have somebody and we're together. The problem though is that when Bassirou Diomaye Faye became president, over the last year, he has been a little bit retrogressive, and that's a whole other topic that in another session we'll dissect it much more. So I mentioned that to show you that these imperialists, and in this scenario, with France being at the helm, when you're talking about the so-called Francophone Africa.
I hate that term, by the way.
Yes, we need to come up with different ones. The point is this: Côte d'Ivoire is family with France.
Yes.
You see,
yes.
Alassane Ouattara was here. Alassane Ouattara jailed his leading opponent in the last elections. So just like Museveni and Samia Suluhu, those three people. In fact, the elections were all in October for Côte d'Ivoire and for Tanzania. But those two, as you know, they had all jailed their leading opponents. So Côte d'Ivoire is family in their corner. You see, family in the French corner. So if you're looking at Central African countries and Western African countries, there's still a sizable percentage that is still very much in France. So once we acknowledge that, we realize what we are up against. But France has now taken advantage of this moment because they realized that some of their biggest prizes, like Niger and the uranium, some of their biggest prizes like Mali and the gold, because Mali is amongst the 5 leading gold producers in Africa, Burkina Faso and its gold too, you know, they realize that, okay, we are losing some of these people, so we have to make up for lost ground. Now, what they usually do is to either pull the strings they appear to be pulling on Bassirou Diomaye Faye of beginning to progressively corrupt and otherwise a previously good leader, you know? Like imagine very concentrated, something very concentrated that is gradually diluted. That is exactly what they do. It was the same story in Guinea, the great country of Sékou Touré. Yeah, where there was a coup d'etat in Guinea. I believe his name is Dambuya. He took over, and then there were elections and he won. But he's now, you know, he's nothing to write home about now because the same thing has happened to him, which is why I'm telling you that the imperialist always works with a long-term agenda, which serves dual purposes. The first one is a good one. Thomas Sankara talked about it. The second one is a bad one. That's what's happening currently. In the sense that they have people like Jacques Foccart, who was the guy in charge of Africa during the Charles de Gaulle years of the 60s. And that's when they came up with France Afrique, a very long-term agenda of ensuring that Africa is completely in their orbit. You see? Now, as they were doing that, now we have France Afrique 2.0 of how does France now somersault again so that not only are they relevant, but they have immense influence. You see? So why now? Because it is part of that agenda to ensure that they increase on their relevance in Africa, they increase on the returns on their investments. When you hear Macron saying that France, you know, is going to give $23 billion, look more at the return on investment. When you look at Macron leaving Kenya and going to Ethiopia and meeting, you know, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia and announcing that France is going to loan Ethiopia $63 million. Compare that, Orina, to the $5 billion that it took for Ethiopia to construct the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. $5 billion. 63 million is a small pittance compared to $5 billion. And that $5 billion, as you remember, they didn't get nobody's loan. That was Ethiopians themselves. Because that project was beset by a lot of financial issues because of the conflict between Ethiopia and Egypt. So the World Bank stepped aside.
With the Nile.
Yeah, the IMF stepped aside. You know, all the usual donors stepped aside and lenders. But Ethiopia said, okay, guys, you want to know who is a real African? It's somebody who does not wait for the imperialist money to do what they need to do. So I personally have gotten information and messages from Ethiopians across the world telling me how I contributed $100. I
Really?
contributed $50. So they did that through local bonds. People donated parts of their salaries.
Oh, wow.
And they raised $5 billion.
Wow.
That constructed Africa's largest dam. So when Macron shows up there and says, we're loaning you 63 million, I hope that when you juxtapose that, you begin to see that the African does not even need this $23 billion at all. So what happened in Nairobi was simply France rolling out their long-term agenda to continue being completely relevant in Africa, to continue occupying a central place right here in Africa. Unfortunately, Orina, many of our African presidents played along because Macron did not invite himself. Macron convinced Kenya's President William Ruto that can we co-host the first ever France-Africa summit in an Anglophone country. And as Macron himself said during the concert that they attended on 12th evening, which is yesterday, right?
Yeah, it was 12th is yesterday. I think
Yeah,
so. Yes.
yeah. As Macron himself said, he said William Ruto has to be crazy. He had to be crazy to agree to co-chair this summit, because even Macron knows that the fact that there was an African president from a very influential African country willing to co-host a summit that would attract most African presidents. Because, by the way, most of them were in Nairobi. Name them, they were here. Alassane Ouattara was here.
Yeah. Faye was here.
Yeah, Faye was here. John Mahama was here.
Yeah.
Actually, it was the largest gathering of African presidents outside the African Union in the last 20 or 30 years. You see, the largest. So this was a major PR victory for France. But the beauty of the conversation we're having now is the fact that now we are punching holes into that narrative by reminding people that the African is awakened, that the African is very much familiar with the imperialist agendas. Now, this brings me to the second part on why this long-term agenda of the imperialist can work in our favor as Africans.
Yeah.
Thomas Sankara used to say that imperialism is a bad student. It always repeats the same tactics, doing things the same way. Take away their ability to dangle the carrot of loans and grants, and they have nothing left. It's literally the main thing they use every time they want to hoodwink or to twist African countries. They simply dangle the carrot of, okay, we're going to give you this loan or we're going to give you this grant. Or they wield the stick of, if you don't do this, we will cut off what we're doing. But now the African must realize that we do not need that money. We just don't need it. And Ethiopia proved it. Ethiopia completely proved it, that your money and my money and everybody's money as we as African people is enough. It's just that we have not figured out how to refocus our energy and attention on local mobilization of all the money we need to do the things we need to do. So we keep looking west or even east, you see. And because of that, our presidents, if they are not going to Washington, they are going to Beijing. If they are not going to Beijing, they are going to Moscow. And it's so important for us to never forget what Kwame Nkrumah said. And I saw William Ruto using that quote as if it is his. But it's Kwame Nkrumah who said, we face neither east nor west.
Oh, that was Kwame Nkrumah's...
Yeah, that is Kwame Nkrumah.
Now he's making it his.
Yeah, because William Ruto was right there saying, every time people ask me ABCD, I always tell them, we're not facing... But it is Kwame Nkrumah who said that.
You need to credit the great ancestor. He's the reason why we are here now, man. He's the reason why
Exactly. And the reason why that must be remembered by all Africans who are also diehard supporters of Russia, this is often a point of divergence amongst us Pan-Afrikanists. I know now there are people who feel attacked just by me saying this, but I completely agree with Kwame Nkrumah that we face neither east nor west, we face forward.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
So imagine if the summit like the one that was held in Nairobi on May 11th and May 12th was organized purely by these African presidents. And France is not at the table. France is not a factor. And in that summit, imagine if these presidents are saying, guys, we are not leaving Nairobi, Kenya, until we find an answer to the question, what is Africa going to do about the odious debts? Because we lose billions every year on these odious debts. Odious in the sense that these are illegal debts. I do not remember ever being consulted by any African president, either in a referendum or even a public gathering, that we would like to take $5 billion
from the IMF.
Yeah, that your children and your grandchildren and great-grandchildren will pay. Do you agree? Because it's our money, man.
Yeah.
They do not pay these loans from their own pockets. It is the taxpayers who pay.
Yeah.
So imagine if these presidents had simply asked themselves, can we do what Thomas Sankara told us 40 years ago? Can all of us simply say we're not going to pay?
Yeah, that's what I've always said that.
Yeah.
I've always said that. Let's not pay.
Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen? You know, we are too scared of white people. That's
Exactly.
the problem. We're too scared of white people, and
Yeah.
it makes me sick.
Yeah.
Like, what are they gonna do? Fine, if they'll put, because I know this Africa, they'll say, oh, you know, they'll give us sanctions. Well, fine. If they'll give us sanctions, then you'll say, fine, you keep your economies, give us all the sanctions. We will figure it out on our own.
Exactly.
That's an evolutionary thinking I want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally. And then, remember, now we are doing what we said we will do, that we will keep sprinkling this with solutions, you know? So we have said that these people have a long-term agenda. How about we also implement the agendas we already have anyway? And one of them is the Abuja Treaty, 1991,
Yes.
Organization of African Unity. People met, you know, those presidents, much as they had their issues, but clearly they were better off than what we have today, most of what we have, because they had the foresight to ask themselves, guys, we need a single African currency. What can we do? And so they met in Abuja, 1991. They came up with the Abuja Treaty. Exactly 3 years later, on May 12th, the same day that Macron was messing up here in Nairobi, exactly the same date, May 12th, 1994, the Abuja Treaty came into force, meaning that it was ratified by at least 2/3 of African countries. So it came into force. It is there, and the Abuja Treaty is calling for a single African currency. You know, this nowadays, sometimes you find economists saying it's not possible because of this and this, but all that is just BS. Because every time Kenya pays loans, every time Zambia pays loans, every time South Africa pays loans, they pay with dollars. Meaning, we lose a lot of money because you have to then convert the Kenya shilling to the dollar and then pay that $100 million, you know. You don't pay that in Kenya shillings. You pay in dollars. So Africa loses billions every single year. Africa loses a lot of money just paying this. Now, if we had a single African currency, that we would not be losing that money. And we would not need anybody's loan. Because all the billions that we lose, all these billions that we lose because of this dollarized global economic order, euroized global economic order, that keeps working against Africa. But instead of Basiro Diomaye Faye and Zambia's Hakainde Hichilema, the president, instead of Kenya's William Ruto, instead of all these presidents who gathered, you know, Egypt's Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, instead of them, you know, asking themselves, guys, it's been 32 years since the Abuja Treaty came into force. Why on earth do we still not have a single African currency? Instead of them prioritizing issues like that, they just tout a historic renewal of the France-Africa partnership, and then the French agenda and the imperialist agenda gets to win the day. By now, we're shining a light on that and we're saying we do not care about the French-Africa relations. What we care about, what we are preoccupied about, are the Africa-Africa relations.
Yeah.
And the Africa-Africa relations that look at the Berlin Conference and say, we may now be having all these 54 plus 1 or 2 countries, but we are going to make these political colonial boundaries increasingly meaningless. Doesn't mean you stop being Kenyan, doesn't mean you stop being Nigerian, but your Kenyanness stops subtracting from your Africanness. Because as long as that continues, then the imperialist, that long-term imperialist agenda continues ruling the day. You see? So it is so important. We're saying at this stage that we would have expected that African leaders coming together will address a critical issue like a single African currency. We'll say that we are tired of having 41 different currencies on this continent.
Yes.
We are tired of Orema traveling to Ghana and his Kenya shillings cannot help him. He has to change this money into US dollars and then change it to the Ghanaian cedi in Accra. We are tired of all that, but they didn't do it. They didn't do it at all. But I just need people to understand that this summit is simply part of a long-term French agenda to continue wielding influence in Africa, to continue playing a central role in Africa. And now they have made inroads into the eastern part of Africa to further solidify, make up for the lost ground that they lost in the western part.
So now, is it a coincidence that when France has lost Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, they're coming to Kenya? Because I know people will want to know that, and I know that's what everybody's saying. Why are they coming here now? And why are they choosing Kenya? But me, I've always said this. Kenya is a very friendly country when it comes to white supremacy. We are very obedient.
Yeah.
We are very compliant. We are known as the darling of white supremacy, or any non-black foreigner who wants to come and set up shop here or do anything. Kenya is the right place to do it in Africa. Yeah. Among other few Africa. But Kenya, I think I've always said Kenya is the most westernized country in Africa.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Let me give everybody a short history lesson to understand why Kenya. First of all, Kenya is amongst the top 5 sub-Saharan Africa economies. It's a very strong economy. It's very geopolitically important. In fact, one of the reasons it is so difficult to instigate war in Kenya is because the West needs Kenya. To use your word, because Kenya is a West darling, they cannot afford to see their darling descend into a civil war or any form of extended conflict. But the historical context is this. When Kenya attained independence, because not yet free.
We are far away from that.
Yeah. Kenya was the only country that was radically capitalist. Tanzania had African socialism, commonly touted as Ujamaa, but it was just rooted in African socialism.
Under Nyerere.
And under Julius Nyerere. Uganda, when Obote took over, he also leaned towards the left.
Okay.
It was not as coherent as Nyerere's, but he was a leftist, He really sought to have socialist policies. In fact, people do not know that even Idi Amin himself was supported by the West because the West had gotten nervous with Obote because of his socialist policies. Of course, mixed in those socialist policies was a lot of corruption. So it's not that socialism failed and now, the West wanted to come and take over. No, not at all. But what happened is that because there was a lot of corruption mixed into that, Idi Amin did receive support initially from the West in that coup d'etat that then took away Obote. Now, the reason I give this historical context is so that people can understand that Kenya from the get-go has always been firmly in the ultra-capitalist corner, which is why even the gap between the rich and the poor in Kenya is extremely high. Just like South Africa and Nigeria, And it is not by accident that Sub-Saharan Africa's strongest economies are also the ones that have really been in the West corner. Because they usually like using the economy to sabotage those that they disagree with. Like it's now happening with the debt issue in Africa. Or, I also have to provide that warning that even the Sahel region, Africa, more and more African countries will really have to step up in the coming months. Because historically, a country like Mali had a president called Modibo Keita.
Yes, the first.
Exactly. Modibo Keita came up with the Malian franc. And Mali became the only country that walked away from the French-backed CFA. So for 22 years, until 1984, Mali had their own franc. The problem though is this, because Modibo Keita was providing very revolutionary leadership, they used the war of economic attrition. In other words, they starved Mali economically. Mali's economy gradually descended, actually drastically descended. And by 1968, the economy was so bad that, it was a perfect socio-economic environment for a coup d'etat to be staged.
Okay.
So Modibo Keita was then kicked out. And the thing is that at the time in Mali, a lot of the local populace, the citizens of Mali, actually supported the coup. Because at the end of the day, Orina, we are all hardwired biologically to survive. If, I don't like snakes, if a snake somehow, drops into this place where you and I are, the last thing the viewers will hear from me will not be Modibo Keita, but they'll just see me running off this door. Because of that instinct, human instinct for survival, you see. So we have to appreciate that at the end of the day, revolutions must deliver livelihoods to the people. Because people cannot eat ideologies or slogans. At the end of the day, and because imperialists really understands this, they are so good in then saying, okay, so you think you're smart, bro? We're going to show you. And then they gradually strangle the economy. So they did that to Mali, and then the economy was so bad. Of course, Modibo Keita did have his weaknesses of a lot of intolerance and all that, but it was also him reacting to the West fighting him, you see, because now political survival demanded that he became paranoid, didn't know who to trust and everything. But the bottom line is that the economy of Mali was suffering so much that when the coup plotters came, history records that it was largely a local coup, but of course, France was behind the scenes, not out. It was not overt like it was in other countries, like Central African Republic. In this case, France's role was very covert. It was in the shadows, but they just took advantage of the fact that the populace was really disgruntled. So the coup succeeded. A guy called Moussa Touré then became president. No, Moussa Traoré. A guy called Moussa Traoré then became president. Moussa Traoré now had total support of the West because they got what they wanted. So much so that in 1984, Moussa Traoré led Mali back into the French CFA. So the Mali CFA under Moussa Traoré then was dissolved, and Mali adopted the French-backed CFA like 14 other West and Central African countries. He went on to rule until 1991, 23 years, and really messed up Mali. But the West didn't care because they had Moussa Traoré, they had Mobutu. I know there's a bit of revisionism nowadays of people sometimes looking at Mobutu as a hero,
Does it?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
There's some people who look at Mobutu as a hero.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
There's that revisionism that is ongoing. So
That's crazy.
yeah. So for Mali, you needed to see that historical arc that even in the case of Kenya, unless there's systemic shift in Kenya, unless the 2027 elections deliver somebody who is completely different and revolutionary, unless the systemic change, it does not matter who is Kenya's president. Kenya will always be firmly in the corner of the West. Kenya will always dance along when the West plays their beats. So it was very easy for the West, for France in this particular case, to answer the question, who can we work with in East Africa that wields a lot of influence, that has historically been part of us? The answer was Kenya. Now, once you understand that, then I urge everybody, if you can't even write this down, everybody should understand that the goal of a revolution is not regime change. The goal of a revolution is systemic change. Because if a revolution only delivers regime change, then you leave those imperialist systems in place. You leave the imperial presidency in place. The people have little say of ensuring accountability. So any revolution in Africa must always remember that it is about systemic change. Because when you have systemic change, then you're going to have Kenya at a very deep level having a paradigm shift that says we are truly going to just face forward. When Ruto says that he's facing forward, he's not.
He's not.
Yeah, he's totally not. And if the next president is not Ruto, but is still cut from the same cloth, the same thing will just continue. Because it's what has happened in Africa for the last 70 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the summit now. Well, you saw, wait, but before we go to the summit, is it true when people say that because France has lost Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, France is looking east now, is looking at Kenya as a gateway to East Africa? Is that true? Before we go to the crazy things that happened in the summit.
Yeah. First of all, let's reiterate what you and I said at the beginning of this. Yes, France has lost those 3 countries, but Africa must ensure that the loss is not just temporary. Now, we will come to that at the tail end of this. Yeah,
when you're talking about Mali.
Yeah, when you're talking about them, because they like putting us in a very complacent mood.
Okay.
They really like where we think that it's all good. Picture a football match. Let me remind folks of anybody who is a football fan in Istanbul, when Liverpool is 3 goals down to the great AC Milan, a very good team defensively. I look at that as currently France is in the same position like AC Milan at that time.
Okay.
You see, yes, they're ahead, but Africa cannot be complacent. Africa cannot be complacent because I can show you numerous instances. We've just discussed Modibo Keita. For 8 years, the young people who were there at the time, none of us was born, well, at least in this room, but those who were there at the time and they were young people, probably were also celebrating Modibo Keita as the Ibrahim Traoré of that time.
Okay.
You see? And I expect that they might have thought that we finally got these people, man. They lost us. The same way we are saying that they have lost these 3 countries.
Yes.
So those who were there at that time and were revolutionaries and were truly anti-imperialist, they thought that France had lost Mali. And then they had even stronger evidence. Because you see, today's Burkina Faso and today's Mali and today's Niger are still using that CFA. But the Mali of that time was not even using the CFA. They were using the Malian franc. So they had an even bigger right to say that Charles de Gaulle, the French president at the time, has lost us. France has lost us. But that is exactly where France wanted them to be. Because in that thinking, where you think that, we defeated these people, they're just gradually pulling the strings. And it's often about economic strangling. You see, it's often about that kind of economic strangling. So people need to understand that, so that, yes, we acknowledge and we celebrate that, you know, there are these three revolutionary transformative leaders, but there was also Modibo Keita.
Yeah.
You see, so we have to play an even longer game than these people. They are playing a long game, ours has to be even longer. We have to be smart on this geopolitical chessboard. Imagine a scenario where I really urge Ibrahim Traoré, Assimi Goïta of Mali, and Abdourahmane Chani of Niger to begin working a lot more directly with African people. For example, they need to answer the question, how can we have 1,000 Kenyan youth to come to Burkina Faso for some kind of activity? You see, because it is these African people themselves who will ensure that France does not economically strangle Burkina Faso or Mali. So the more we have the African people awakened to the tricks that have been used in the past, the more these same African people will ensure that it does not happen again. I understand that at a president-to-president level, it's very difficult because I cannot imagine, you know, Ibrahim Traoré sitting with William Ruto to discuss Pan-African stuff. He understands that they are completely not cut from the same cloth. But he needs to also remember that there are millions of Kenyans who have his mindset.
Yeah.
Who celebrate him, you see. So how can there be an outreach more to these kinds of people? It's what Thomas Sankara used to do. And we need a lot more of that now so that we don't have history repeating itself. A situation where, like currently in Mali, you know, as we'll talk about that, they are already really advanced in terms of that economic strangulation. But then back to this particular summit that was here, it is just the first move, you know. France has simply moved a pawn a few steps forward, but their eyes are on checkmating us so that 20, 30, 40 years from now, when it will be even 2 French presidents down the road, you know, now you have a situation where this gold that has been discovered in Western Kenya, this gold that is in Nyanza province in Kenya, you know, places like Korea.
Yeah.
If we're not careful, 20, 30 years from now, those part of the $23 billion, remember, a huge chunk of that money is private investment.
Yeah.
It's not government
It's
money.
not.
It's private.
Lots of people don't want.
Yeah.
No, this is the French businessman coming to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you break down that $23 billion, I don't have the facts now, but I bet you, I bet you this is amazing coffee that some of those companies are mining companies.
Oh, good.
And some of those companies, you can easily hear that 20, 30 years from now, they're now really mining gold from parts of Kenya.
In Western Kenya, they're doing it.
Yeah.
But the British company
Yeah.
took the gold mine in Ikolomani. You saw that, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. So now, in terms of solution there, we have to just keep following the example of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. I am so sure, Rina, that as a young person yourself, if a serious and transformative and revolutionary Kenyan government said that we want to set up a mine in whatever part of Kenya, and we want Kenyans to be the majority shareholders, every share is going for 10,000 Kenya shillings, will many Kenyans jump on board?
No.
Yeah.
They won't.
But if it is transformative leadership, and because what we have to remember always is that this gold doesn't come magically from the ground. It has to be mined. Unfortunately, Lorena, many African countries don't have the capacity because for the last 70 years, more than 90% of these miners are from the West or the East. So you'd have to really search long and hard to find an African-owned mining company whose majority shareholders are African people themselves. You'd really have to search long. So we are then left with the option of either you float this stand on the market and find whoever is most capable, so that even if it is a very genuine tender and a very fair process, chances are more than 90% that you still end up with a Western mining company. And in capitalism, because all these mining companies operate within capitalism, usually the profit goes to the shareholders. So the bulk of everything goes to the shareholders.
Yes.
You see?
Yes.
So we have to think about the long game of how do we start developing African-owned, competitive and truly professional mining companies that are going to, personally, I believe in ensuring that there's cooperative community ownership. And as a matter of law, we are saying today on your show that African countries need to start changing their legislation and demanding that 50+1 of shares must always be owned by both the local people and the national populace.
The circles.
Yeah.
Cooperatives.
Yeah. So however they do that, but there has to be that law. So that even if a company is from Australia, China, wherever, they know that they will always have 49% and less.
Yeah.
So the legalities and the details of how do you end up with 51% of cooperative community-owned shares and maintain the professionalism, take away the politics from that, you know, how do you do that? That's a question we must answer, because if we don't, even the best run countries, you know, even in Mali, the leading gold miner currently in Mali is, I believe, from Australia.
Really?
Yeah. Because this gold will not come magically from the ground. You see? So go to Mali, go to Burkina Faso, go to Niger, and you'll find that many of the mining companies, it's just that now the terms are better for the country.
Okay.
The terms are better, but the guys in the driver's seat of the mining are still foreigners.
Okay.
You see?
So better in terms of what?
Maybe a higher percentage.
Okay.
Yeah. The licensing, there's more money. These companies have to pay more money. The government has higher shares. If in the past it was 8%, now it is 10, 15%.
Okay.
You see. But the point is that it is still a foreign-owned company. The point is that the bulk of the resources are still going out there. But there's hope. There's a lot of hope, because if you look at a country like Botswana, I unashamedly celebrate Duma Boko. And Duma Boko has, you know, there's currently a process going on for the Botswana government to own the majority shares in the diamond mining companies.
Yes.
Majority. So not 10%, not 30%. And they have even opened it up more to Angola and Namibia, that are also mining countries, so that they would rather have Namibia buying more shares, Angola buying more shares, so that at the end of the day, it is both Botswana itself and other African countries that have majority shares. So that's already ongoing. You know, this is not something that will happen. It's a process that is already ongoing, and Duma Boko has confirmed as much. And that's the model that has to be followed across Africa. Because 20% of 1 million is still a minority. It still means that people are getting much less.
Okay.
You see? Yeah.
Wow. So now let's talk about the deal. But before the summit happened, 800 French troops, they're already here. They're already in Mombasa. Why do you think they're here? What's the, because you know they're saying maritime security, they're saying the French will help train the KDF, the Kenya Defense Forces. They're also saying what? Peacekeeping, disaster response. Why are they really here? Especially now when France is now increasing the influence in Kenya. My theory, it's a classic example, you know, like it's the same reason why the British troops are here, to protect their power. You can't have all these businesses, you can't have all these mines, you can't have all this influence without the army. The French army has to come here to solidify and to protect their influence, their loot, and whatever they're trying to do here. And also, if you misbehave, just remember we have our men here. I don't know if I'm wrong, if I'm right. What do you think about that?
Yeah, totally. And the evidence, the irrefutable evidence, can be found in Venezuela. You know, when America simply dropped in, took the president, it's because of military might. And one hard truth that one bitter pill that Africa has to swallow is to honestly answer the question of, comparatively, how is our military strength comparatively? And the answer will be that it is extremely small, especially because we have to buy our weaponry, either from the West or from Russia or from China, which is something that one day will have to be really, really addressed. Now, that is part of the evidence to your theory that I completely agree with. You know, France, if it was just about ground, like training grounds, there's so much ground in France that they can train if they want. And that includes terrain, because parts like Marseille in France, you know, their weather is not as it is in Paris. You see? So if it was purely about the ocean, there are water bodies in France that these people can train in. The same applies to Britain or to America. So at the end of the day, these military bases are more of Trojan horses. You know, Trojan horse in the sense that, you know, in Greek mythology, the Trojan horse shows up just like a big statue, but hiding within this Trojan horse is a whole army. So once they're already inside the territory of the enemy, they simply get out of the Trojan horse and cause a lot of havoc and conquer. So all these military bases are just Trojan horses that once they're inside the country, then they can militarily protect their interests. Because it's always about protecting their interests.
It's always.
Yeah. And the ultimate form of protecting your interest is militarily, you know? Yeah. So if they have their bases here, like, you know, now they do, the British do, but the Americans they don't have like an official base, but in Lamu County, they have partnered with the Kenya government. You know, they have a place there that they really use. So, as long as we have military bases scattered across Africa, it means that any day the imperialist decides that, let's just teach these people a lesson or two, they will easily do it. We have to wake up to that reality. And that's part of what I meant by systemic change. Because if Kenya ends up with another president who simply perpetuates that policy of allowing these military bases, then fundamentally, from a national security perspective, nothing changes. Nothing changes. So the French army is here, you know, forget about all that stuff of maritime security, peace, and, you know, it's all hogwash. They are primarily here to militarily protect the French interests, which means that the French interests in Kenya have risen. Yeah, they have now risen, and hence the need of the French military to be here. Yeah.
Now, you know, when it happened, I couldn't believe it. But now that they're signing all these deals and France is now laying its flag, I'm like, makes sense.
Yeah.
Now the summit came, huh?
Yeah.
And, you know, even the way Macron answered that question when he said, all of West Africa will be here, but I regretted that Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger won't be here. And I think the way he was smiling and everything, that grin, you know, I'm really good at reading people. That, like the way he said it, it means that, hey, Burkina Faso, yeah, just because you are decolonizing from me, I've found new friends now.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
And like, that was an indirect way of telling Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger that it's okay. I'll go find friends somewhere else.
Yeah.
Now, later on, he said that, yo, we are the true Pan-Africanists. And I know I addressed it harshly yesterday on my platform. When you heard that statement, we are the true Pan-Africanists. Like, what came into your mind? But like, for us Pan-Africanists, the true ones, the true ones, I was like, what the hell? You know, I rewinded that video for like 20 times. I was like, did he just say that?
Or is it AI?
I thought it was AI.
Yeah.
I thought it was AI.
Yeah.
Then I was like, oh, he really said we are the true Pan-Africanists.
Yeah.
And as Pan-Africanists have to be very careful because this is what they do.
Yeah.
This is what white supremacy does.
Yeah.
They take our stuff as black people and then they remix it and co-opt it to fit their agenda. They took the fist, the Black Power fist. Remember in the 2020 protests?
Yeah.
Now LGBT is using the Black fist.
Yeah.
The white feminist movements are using that's ours. That's the Black Panther fist.
Yeah.
And then now the red, black, and green flag, they're using it in almost all, all activism realms.
Yeah.
That's the Pan-African flag that Garvey made.
Yeah.
So they're co-opting it, but you know, they can take anything.
Yeah.
But they can't take away the Pan-African, they can't co-opt it.
Yeah.
They can't co-opt Pan-Africanism and they can't remix it to fit their agenda.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Cultural appropriation, political appropriation, sometimes even spiritual appropriation, is all about taking the essence of another entity and becoming the quasi-owner or actual owner of that essence. And in simpler terms, the African narrative has often been controlled from outside Africa. You know, one of the saddest things is when you are looking at the president of Angola and you're seeing that he has Portuguese names, that is as black as you and I. When you're looking at president of Kenya and you're seeing that he too has English names. Now, Shakespeare famously said that which you call a rose by any other name, it still smells as sweet. In other words, there's a lot of power in a name, whereas it doesn't completely, you cannot be defined solely by your name, but there's still a lot of power in a name. And the reason I give you that context is to show you how the African narrative has really been stolen. You know, the African narrative from at a spiritual level, even an economic level, because the very concept of sustainability that has been all the vogue in international development for the last couple of decades is as African as it gets. Because to date, the average American uses a lot more energy per capita than the average African. Because the African is not wasteful. The African believes in the circular economy. You know, we've lived with that for generations. But it is now being defined in the West as if it is a Western concept that is then imported here. And then we have all these circular economy experts, sustainability experts, yet it's as African as it gets. And don't even get me started on the medical angle, because currently the life expectancy of a country like Nigeria is 56 years, which is extremely young. But the life expectancy in a country like Kenya about 100 years ago was 90 years plus. You see, more than 80 years. Octogenarian and nonagenarian was commonplace in a lot of African countries. It was totally commonplace. But that is often treated as if it was an anomaly and not mainstream. Now, how is it, Arena, that if an African 100 years ago, 200 years ago, lived almost twice as long as today, yet we didn't have a lot of the Western medicine. Actually, we didn't have any back then, you know, there's something missing there, because even medically speaking, that African medical indigenous knowledge is then completely eroded. And the narrative becomes that if you've got a headache, you must take this painkiller.
Yeah.
You see. So now it becomes a scenario of the only way that the African is managing pain is through Western medicine. Cancer. Currently, an African dies of cancer every single minute. If we've been talking for the last 60 minutes, there are tragically 60 Africans who are dead because of cancer. Yet, cancer was not high at all. In fact, it was barely there 100 years ago. So something is amiss, and it all goes back to when we lose our narrative. Like this example that you've just given, you know, we cannot afford a situation where now when Macron says that he is a Pan-African, and that is not an isolated statement. It is part of this long-term agenda that I'm telling you. And tragically, in a twisted way, Macron is not just uttering an empty statement, because we already talk of Francophone Africa, meaning that to date, France is still the identity
of us.
Yeah.
It's Anglophone, us.
Exactly.
Lusophone.
It's still the identity. So we have to be brutally honest with ourselves to accept the fact that if 14 African countries are still using a currency that is backed by France, then they are still the ones, they are still the singular entity, political entity, economic entity that is in control in those countries. See, so once we look at that and we accept that, then the challenge comes back to us that how do we now have a situation where Africa's Gen Z and Africa's Gen Alpha are increasingly looking at each other as fellow Africans? Like, how do we achieve that? And Julius Malema, love him or hate him, but he's a very pragmatic politician.
Like,
you see,
we stand by him even if he loses the appeal.
Yeah,
we still stand by him.
Yeah, because he gave a practical solution, man. Julius Malema gave a very practical solution that now I challenge all African youth to seize that. Julius Malema said, why can't we just teach Swahili all over Africa? And he gave reasons. It was not, I mean, he does not even speak Swahili. If it was a Kenyan, you'd say, or a Tanzanian, you'd say, you guys just want to promote your language. But Malema doesn't speak Swahili. He said, because Swahili is rooted in Bantu, and a lot of African languages are Bantu, have Bantu roots, it's already spoken in multiple African countries, it's easier for more Africans to learn Swahili. So that we stop having these linguistic barriers. So, again, we're saying on your show that as a solution to this rant by Macron, in fact, we're not even reacting to him. You know, this is something that has been in the works for long. His rants are only accelerating that. So that if we now have a situation where a new generation of Africans, I remember once, Orina, I was in Senegal, Dakar, and they speak Wolof and French. So I am in the streets, and I've just come from Gorée Island, where the slaves were being shipped out. And I am itching to have a conversation, you know, with my fellow Africans in the streets of Dakar. But beyond sign language, you know, because back then I didn't speak French, we literally couldn't converse, man. Completely. We just couldn't converse, you know. And let us now listen to Julius Malema and say that Pan-Afrikanists, the true Pan-Afrikanists, must begin conceptualizing and implementing Pan-African solutions. And language remains a massive barrier in Africa, in the quest for Pan-Afrikanism. Language remains a massive, massive barrier. You see? Now, these people with their long game, imagine if Macron didn't speak English. He would not have communicated like he has when he came here.
Yes.
So he made sure many years ago, because dude has always wanted to be president, you know, he made sure that he is bilingual in the sense that he could speak English. And I know that at the back of his mind, he knew that since half of Africa speaks English anyway, I will only be effective if I can communicate in their language. But meanwhile, if the true Pan-Afrikanists bury their heads in the sand regarding something like the language barrier, then truth be told, you will continue knowing very little about Lome Togo. You know, ask the average Kenyan, what is Lome? They will tell you lo what? Ask the average Beninois citizen or Togolese citizen, what is Mombasa? They'll tell you mo what? And they know Marseille, they know Paris, they know this because of the language factor. So it is not right for the true Pan-Afrikanists in Africa to bury their head in the sand regarding the challenges that are causing us to not fully and optimally implement the Pan-African agenda. Language is at the forefront of that. So we echo what Julius Malema said, can Swahili start being taught across Africa? And before the Yorubas and the Igbos and the Fulani, you know, come saying, why not Yoruba? Let's find 5 major languages. Let's teach them all. Let the Kenyans also learn Yoruba.
Why not?
Yeah. So that at the end of the day, we will have a new generation of Africans 20, 30 years from now who actually can communicate with each other wherever they go. And that's power, man. Because remember, the average African already speaks at least 3 languages.
Yeah.
In a country like Kenya or Tanzania, they speak Swahili, they speak their tribal mother tongue, and then they speak English. Same thing in Senegal, you know, they speak Wolof and they speak French. And sometimes those, you know, those who are not, whose communities have their own languages, they also speak that. So it's a lot easier for the African actually to learn an extra language than the white person, because the average American speaks how many languages?
One.
You see our power.
Yeah.
And that's why I say that we already have the African superpower. So the best way to counter Macron claiming that is the true Pan-Africanist is to do what you did, you know, to explain more about that. But more importantly, to address the critical issues that are actually hindering true Pan-Africanism from prevailing across the continent. Yeah.
Like even when Trump, like what did Trump say the other day?
Yeah.
If these Africans come together, they might, he said something to the point, they'll be powerful or something like that.
Yeah.
And then now Macron said he's so what I'm trying to say is white supremacy knows the value of Pan-Africanism more than even black people, because they know it's the only thing that can extinguish their power. It's the only thing that can defeat white supremacy.
Exactly.
That's why Pan-Africanists are some of them, historically, are some of the most targeted people.
Exactly.
Some of the most that's why they took down Gavi.
Exactly.
That's why they took down so many Pan-Africanists.
Exactly.
We can spend the whole talking about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because they know that if it succeeds, it's just automatically, and it's not, you know what? It's not even on the offense.
Yeah.
Pan-Africanism is defense. Defense meaning we just take back our land. We take back our, we don't want to kill white people. We don't want to go and no, that's not what we are preaching. Taking back our resources and uniting and charting our path forward.
Yeah.
That's it. That's what Pan-Africanism is all about.
Exactly.
And because they don't want that to happen, that's why Macron is saying, oh, I believe they want to co-opt Pan-Africanism so that the young people can have a new wrong meaning of Pan-Africanism.
Yeah, True.
And that's why me and you and other Pan-Africanists have to really define what Pan-Africanism really is, so that these white people cannot come and give out their version.
Their version, yeah. True.
Yeah. So now, DJ, then he went on, huh? What do you think, before, actually, you know what, let's talk about it. He stood up and he said, hey, you Africans, shut up, keep quiet, this is a total lack of respect. And you know me, I was like, the first thing that came to my mind is what I've always been saying. The British are very subtle with their racism. Yeah. The French are very loud. They don't hide it. Yeah. And what Macron showed on that stage is a microcosm of how they will relate with us for the next many years that we've signed all these deals. Like the hubris of him saying, yo, you guys, keep quiet. And you know, I always say this, and no Kenyan challenged him on that. No Kenyan challenged him on him saying he's a true Pan-Africanist. All those panelists, all those so-called, you know, all those people who were in those, you know, they were doctors. You couldn't sit down and say, wait, did this guy say he's a true Pan-Africanist? You had a chance to question him. You're in the same panel with him. And you had a chance to tell him, Macron, you have no right to tell us to shut up in our own country. Because a host who lets a guest control his household or her household is a weak host. What did you think about that exchange? Like, no, it wasn't even an exchange. It was what do you think about him just showing his, what can I say? His outright hubris to just say, hey, you guys, this is it. I'm the one who has the money. I'm the one who's coming to help you people. So you will listen to me. And shut up. And this is a total lack of respect. And even in the video, I was like, you know what's a total lack of respect? Colonization. Slavery. You destroying Haiti. You know what? Him going to Algeria and saying he won't apologize for French colonialism. That's a total lack of respect. Like, what did you think about that remark?
Actually, it was very telling. I did a bit of a study and I tried to see what non-Africans were saying about it. And for example, if you go to the Guardian, the UK newspaper, The Guardian, that is mostly considered as a progressive paper, media entity. Beneath their video, anybody can go there and see, you'll see that because the consumption is largely Western, surprisingly, a lot of people were saying that, wow, what a strong leader. And these are progressives, most likely. And I say that not to shame them, but to bring out a brutal reality that there's a world of a difference between the perception of Africa from the world and from we Africans. Because if you look at the same video on largely African media entities, the same video, like any Kenyan or any African media entity that posted the same video, you will see how the criticism is scathing. Now, for me, that mattered because it showed us how much work we still have to do for well-meaning fellow human beings who even despise Macron and Trump and imperialism. But they are so much steeped in that culture and in that system that on an issue like that, they would not look at it the same way that you and I look at it. Now, because we need a critical mass globally to truly change the systems in Africa, mostly the African people, but we cannot work in isolation. So we need most of the younger generation globally. We need to increasingly share with them our perspective and our narrative. Because remember, 30 years from now, the President of America and the Prime Minister of Britain and the President of France will be people who are now probably in their 20s or 30s.
Gen Zs.
Yeah. So if we are already working on changing their perceptions, and we do that by really owning our narrative, so that they begin seeing your perspective and my perspective. Because if we don't do that, all they have is that Western perspective that is completely flawed, you see. So more specifically, the imperialist, and France is a central pillar of imperialism. The imperialist is extremely entitled, entitled to your allegiance, you know, I pledge allegiance to you. So the imperialist is entitled to your allegiance. The imperialist is also entitled to your resources. And how they go about executing that entitlement is by doing exactly what Macron said. If you look at that video again, he stands up, he scans the room, and then people focused more on what he said after. But listen to what he told that lady, and I think she handled the situation very well.
You're not waiting your turn.
I will make order.
I think she was a moderator. When she tells him that already you can't wait for your turn, what Macron says after she says that, for me, was much, much more telling.
As he's picking the mic?
Exactly. It was much, much more telling because it revealed how the imperialist thinks.
Okay.
So I want people to go again to that video and listen to what he says after the lady tells him that you can't wait for your turn. He says that I want to make some order. Which basically what he wanted to say, only that English is not his first language, is I want to restore order.
Okay.
You see? So, after hearing the noise in this room, after scanning where is this noise coming from, I have concluded that I am the only one who can restore order. And that's exactly how the imperialist thinks. Your civilization as an African doesn't matter to them. It's not even civilization. So when the colonialists came, it's because they wanted to restore order to our civilization. They looked at us as backward and uncivilized. So their mentality was to come and restore these barbaric people, restore order back to this orderless country, which is why they would come up with their own laws, and these laws would become our laws. If you look at history, I really urge Africans to, to study history a lot. You and I will keep educating people on these matters. You will see that a country like Congo, Kenya, Tanzania, all these African countries, how they were mapping out their borders is they would come, find the local chief, sign a treaty. This guy places a thumb on, their paper. And this treaty is saying that all the way from River Nile to this mountain here, we are now your protectors, hence the term protectorate.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, we're now your protectors.
That's where it came from. Huh?
Exactly. But according to their laws, now that land belongs to them.
Okay.
And they can justify that by saying, we went to the local chief, that chief agreed, so this land belongs to us. So that's how they're able to share, all these African territories by assuming that there's no order, there's no law. So we are bringing law. The same way Macron assumed that there was no order in that auditorium. And I'm a public speaker myself. I don't like folks speaking when I'm talking. The issue is not the fact that, there needed to be a bit more order. The issue here is that he betrayed or he revealed how the imperialist thinks, because he could easily have told his aide, can you go to the master of ceremony and tell them to announce that, guys, let's have a bit more order. He could have done that, but that's not how the imperialist thinks. Even the food that you eat, the food that most of us eat, Africa is currently suffering massively from lack of food sovereignty. There's a war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. There's a wheat disruption. All of a sudden, we have no wheat. There's a fertilizer disruption. But meanwhile, organic farming is all the rage in the West. In fact, buying organic food is extremely expensive. It's now a preserve for the rich. organic farming shuns the chemical fertilizers, which is exactly what the African was doing all these years. Before the Macrons of 100 years ago came and said, we want to restore some order to the agriculture. How do we restore order to the agriculture? By bringing in chemical fertilizers so that this food can grow quickly. You know, we are restoring order, you see.
So this order that you're saying
exactly
is I'm bringing my systems.
Exactly.
So order is, we'll do this thing my way.
Exactly.
The deals that were signed, it was about AI, technology, infrastructure, worth billions and billions of dollars. Which other one? There are many things, transport, right? What do you think about those deals? And to me, I just say, like, I know you answered it. Actually, you know what? You answered it in the beginning when you said that we can do these things on our own, be it AI, be it technology. We have the coltan, we have the cobalt, we have the lithium, we have all the materials to make our own technology. Why do we need France to do so? France needs us. Why do we need their help to do it? Why can't we, unite and raise some money and do these things on our own? You mean we can't do AI on our own? We can't do Let me tell you, I've worked in the tech space when I was employed. Kenyans are some of the most smartest people when it comes to tech. Let me say Africans, because the problem with African startups, tech startups, is capital. They lack capital. So you know what they do? For them to raise capital, they hire white people to be their CEOs or their CFOs or their CTOs, so that they can look safe to these white, to these white holding companies, to these white funders, so that you guys have a white CEO. Okay. So if you have a white CEO, you look safe for funding. But if you're an all black company from top to bottom,
then you don't.
The chances of you getting that capital is low. So these venture capitalists will be like, you know what? Nah. But if you have a white CEO, they'll listen to you. And that's bad. That's really bad. I'm telling you, Kenya, let me speak for Kenya because I'm in Kenya. Kenya has a lot of talent when it comes to tech. Oh my goodness. It's just funding. It's just funding. What do you think about all these things? Even a year we are building a new railway, commuter railway, using this France money. We can't do these things on our own. Like everything that I saw there, there's nothing we can do on our own if we unite as African people. What do you think about that deal? All those deals that that were signed before we go to Mali?
Okay, in a nutshell, capitalism is about capital, and actually, you use the phrase "just funding." Unfortunately, in capitalism, you would have to delete that "just" because it's the main thing. It's capital that then that runs capitalism. So as long as African countries continue to operate within capitalism, Western style capitalism, then the capital is the oxygen of every business deal, every business venture.
Capital.
The oxygen is the capital, meaning whoever controls the capital then controls the entire ecosystem. So the African has to answer the question of how do we increasingly control this capital? And we have proof of concept from Ethiopia. I mean, I have my issues with Prime Minister Ahmed, especially the Tigrayan war.
Yes.
I think that really is a stain on his leadership. But I really think that he provided the kind of leadership in ensuring that the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam was completed. He gave Africa proof of concept that we already have the capital locally. We just have to mobilize it. You see? Now, the problem though is this, that when you have the corrupt ruling elite mobilizing local capital, they feel that it disempowers them because whoever owns the capital owns the venture. Now, they would rather a situation where they are secretly shareholders in a supposedly French venture. The French is the face, but behind the scenes, a lot of these corrupt ruling elite still end up with a lot of say, either as secret shareholders or, in extreme cases, kickbacks. In fact, kickbacks have created so many millionaires and billionaires on the African continent. So the question that you and I and all Africans must answer is, what can we do so that the African increasingly controls more capital? Because if we are controlling let's say it costs $100 million to build a commuter rail in Nairobi, the solution that I keep offering, and we have the proof of concept, is that grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam that had Ethiopians themselves mobilizing those resources to do it. That's what has to happen. But it will only happen if the people demand that we have to be the ones to do it. Now, the other thing that I know is quite a bone of contention, and we must continue having honest debates, is if you need $100 million to do Project X anywhere in Africa, and you can mobilize $80 million, often locally, they don't even mobilize even $5 million. It's like these foreigners come in with all the money. And they're happy to do that because then they control everything. But assuming that there's transformative leadership that can mobilize, say, $80 million, and there's a deficit of $20 million in the capital needed, is it okay to get $20 million from wherever in the world, China, France, America, Britain, wherever? Because as long as you're the one running the show, as long as you're the one controlling the negotiations on the table, there are people who are purists. They are morally opposed to even a single coin from out there. There are people who are pragmatists who say that if we're the ones controlling the terms of negotiations, and we can get more capital on our own terms and conditions, then what's the problem with that? We must continue having an honest debate on that, with the understanding that whoever controls the capital, we can scream to the moon and back, but if we don't figure out how the African will control more capital, in fact, they will encourage us to keep debating.
Yes.
Because they'll be like, okay, you guys keep talking. But meanwhile, this commuter rail that is done in Nairobi, we as the French get awesome PR. We also smile all the way to the bank. So as we point out that, as we spotlight that, we must spend even more time asking ourselves, between you and I, even just two people, what can be done so that, because Kenya still needs hundreds of kilometers of electric railway and everything. So we still need millions and millions of dollars. So every single Pan-African must lose sleep and scratch their head over answering that question. How do we mobilize more capital as Africans? And as we do that, how do we also have a systemic change so that we're moving away from this hardcore capitalism that runs African countries to African socialism, or whatever we will call it, you see. Because if we don't do that, Macron will be extremely happy.
Yes. Now Mali.
Yeah.
Oh my God.